There was once a poet who lived in a village, who went walking in the mountains to seek inspiration for a poem. Lost in his thoughts and his reverie, he wandered high up to where the clouds lived, and there he got lost. When the rain came and threatened to soak him, he took shelter in a cave where a lioness had also taken herself away from the downpour. The poet saw her, and she saw him. He was forced to run out of the dry cave and take to his heels. But the lioness was in no mood to get wet, and as she had recently eaten, she let the poet go. Unaware of the lack of interest the lioness showed in him, the poet ran for his life until he slipped and went tumbling down the steep slope of the mountain, stopping only when he crashed into a tree. When he came to, he found that he was trapped by the leg in the crook of 2 branches. No matter how he tried, he could not free himself. The rain stopped and the night set in. It was very cold, and by morning he had a fever which left him delirious and weak. Unable to move or to find food, and since no one knew where he was, it began to seem to him as if he might die, trapped there in the tree. As the days went by, he grew weaker and weaker. He was afraid that each night would be his last. But then one morning he saw that a pair of birds had started to build a nest just within reach of his outstretched hand. They seemed quite unconcerned at his presence. Indeed, it seemed to him that perhaps they regarded him as protection from predators. He watched as the nest grew, and soon there was a clutch of eggs within it. The poet was becoming weaker, but the growth he observed in the nest gave him some sense of purpose. He was determined to see the eggs hatch, which of course one day they did. Now he watched as the parents brought food to them in the form of worms and bugs. And one day, one of them brought a morsel of bread which the bird left on the edge of the nest, just within reach of the trapped poet. He gratefully took it and put it into his mouth, and he felt its goodness. From then on, every time the birds brought something for their chicks, they dropped a piece of bread on the rim of the nest for the poet. Slowly he gained back his strength, and one morning he managed to free his trapped leg from the branches of the tree. The last thing he saw before climbing down was the first of the fledglings stretching its wings in the sun. When he returned to the village, he was greeted with joy, but when he recounted his story, he got only disbelief. One morning, a few days later, the poet saw a bird flying above him, heading out of the village. It was carrying a morsel of bread. He recognized it to be one of the birds that had saved his life. He watched patiently for the bird's return, and when it did, he followed it as it flew to a house nearby. There he saw it take some bread from a small heap on the window ledge. When he knocked on the door of the house, it was opened by an old woman. It was obvious that she was quite poor, but she invited the poet in and offered to give him some tea. He accepted the offer, and together they sat and drank. "Do you put bread on the window ledge every day?" he asked her. "Oh yes, every day." "But you seem very poor. Why do you feed the birds when you can hardly feed yourself?" "I love to see those birds come here. They are my only visitors. Besides, everybody, even the birds, needs a bit of kindness, and kindness costs nothing." The poet looked at her with great admiration. "You have no idea what your kindness has done." "Oh, I do not need to know," she said. "That is not why I am kind." The poet never told her his story, but he did visit her every day. Sometimes he just took her a bowl of hot soup, at others a sweet cake, and often when he sat with her, they would just be quiet and still, neither of them feeling the need to talk.